Used Pan Americas can be found for thousands less than buying brand new. In some cases, almost half as much. And so it's got people looking at these bikes and wondering, is it worth picking one up at these prices? What kind of issues am I likely to run into? What do I need to know about this bike before making that kind of decision? Now, before I get into common issues that were experienced by Pan America owners, let's do a quick rundown of the different models of Pan America that are available on the market. When it was introduced in 2021, the Pan America was available in two different versions. We had the base model Pan America, and then we had the Pan America Special, which is what I have, and which was by far the more popular model here in the US. The Pan America Special has semi-active electronic suspension, as well as it adds the cornering lamp, the engine crash guards, the center stand, and a couple of other extras. And the base model Pan America just has a manually adjustable suspension. Now, the way to tell the difference between those two models visually is look at the tank. The Pan America Special has the Harley Davidson Bar and Shield logo painted onto the tank, whereas the base model Pan America just has a HD emblem applied to the tank. Now, in addition to coming with those extras that the base model did not, the Pan America Special was available with two different options that you could pick from. One of which was to opt for spoked wheels instead of the cast aluminum wheels. And the other option was the adaptive ride height feature. This is the feature that allows the bike to lower itself about an inch or so when you come to a stop, so those of us inseam challenged folks could get a little bit more sure-footed on the ground. The easiest way to visually tell if the bike you're looking at has adaptive ride height is to look at the right side fork cap. If it has the adaptive ride height, it will have two wires coming out of the top of that fork cap. In 2022, Harley Davidson updated the Pan America to accept a quick shifter. Now, keywords, accept a quick shifter. So it doesn't come with it, but the 22 model had changes to the wiring harness and the computers of the bike so that you could purchase the Harley quick shifter add-on and have it installed on the bike. So if a quick shifter is a must-have for you, just be aware that the 21 models are not going to have the ability to have that. In 2024, Harley Davidson dropped the base model Pan America from the US market, and that's also when they added the CVO edition Pan America, which essentially is a Pan America Special with different paint, and it comes with adaptive ride height, the spoke wheels, in addition to being dragged through the accessories catalog, but there's no actual difference in the powertrain of the bike. For 2025, they kept the Pan America CVO. They made another CVO edition for 25, but the biggest change in 25 is adding the Pan America ST, which is the Pan America with a 17-inch front wheel instead of the 19 to give it more of a street focus and more street-oriented handling, as well as instead of the semi-active electronic suspension, they went to a manually adjustable suspension, but still one that includes adaptive ride height, so the bike would still lower. Plus, the overall height of the Pan America ST, the seat height, is a little bit lower than the Pan America Special as well, again, being more street focused. Let's talk about common issues that have come up on this bike, and probably the earliest and most well-known common issue on this bike is the radiator hose, the lower one that's right behind this exhaust header here. The Harley service manual says the minimum clearance between the hose and the header when the system is cold is 7 millimeters, which is about the width of a number 2 pencil. So a good way to check if the hose is properly in place is to see if you can fit a pencil in between the hose and the header. If the pencil fits in there freely, ideally with a little bit of room to spare, then that hose is properly installed. Because early bikes that had the hose make contact with the exhaust header was due to the hose not being properly installed at the factory. The issue is that the crimp style hose clamps that they used were not put in the proper place on the hose, and that allowed the hose to slowly back off a bit from being in place on the radiator and getting too close to that exhaust header. To get a little extra peace of mind, a lot of folks, myself included, have trimmed a little bit of the hose where it goes onto the radiator fitting. Trim about, in my case, I trimmed about 1/8 of an inch. You don't really need to do any more than that. And that allows the hose to push further on to the radiator housing and give you a little bit more clearance between the hose and the header pipe. Folks, real quick, I just wanted to mention, if you are looking into trimming the radiator hose, it's important to make sure that you get the clamp in the right spot. So this is a brand new, unused, uncut Pan America radiator hose, and on here you'll notice that there's these white markings. These two white lines in particular are there so that the OEM hose clamp, when you use that, lines up just in between those markings. That puts it in the right spot so that when this is crimped down, it's just in front of the flared edge of the radiator outlet, so that it can't just slip off of there. If the hose clamp is in a different spot, it's going to allow the hose to slip a bit until it reaches where the clamp interferes with that plastic lip. So anyway, if you're going to trim this, you want to first measure the distance between the end of the hose and that white line furthest away from the end, which happens to be 20 millimeters. So now when you trim off 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, whatever, I probably wouldn't go more than 1/4 inch, you're going to remeasure now from the new end of your hose in about 20 millimeters, and that's where you want the outside edge of your clamp to now line up, right? Especially, let's say you're not using the OEM style hose clamp, you're going to replace it with a traditional worm style clamp. Right, these are much wider, much thicker than the OEM clamps, but the key is to like the back outside edge of your clamp. This edge here should be 20 millimeters from whatever the edge, the end of your hose is after you cut it. All right, that will keep the hose from slipping further back and getting closer to the header. All right, back to the video. Now 2023 models and newer, this isn't so much of an issue because the factory added a mount on the bottom of the radiator that accepted a P-clamp that went around the hose and helped to hold it back away from the header pipe, just as extra insurance in case the hose did start to slip off the radiator a little bit. Another common issue with the early models, 2021 and the first half of 2022, was the starter clutch. The starter clutch comes off the starter and it engages the motor. And the issue is that the early ones would have a tendency, the starter clutch had a tendency to bind up. And that would cause, when you went to start the bike, it would attempt to start, but it wouldn't fully turn over, sounding something like this. It was more common to happen when the engine has been heated up. So when you first start it up cold, not too much of a big deal. You go out riding for a bit, maybe stop for gas, and then go and hit the start button again, and that could possibly happen. And in pretty much every case I've experienced, a second push of the starter button always fired it right up. But I do believe that those early starter clutches led to more wear and tear being placed on the battery as extra current, extra power was needed to turn the engine over when that starter clutch bound up. Hence, another common issue with early model bikes was people going through and killing batteries pretty quickly. Now, unfortunately, there's no way to tell just by looking at a bike if it has had that starter clutch replaced with the updated version, but this did only affect model year 21 and early 22s. And if you do buy a bike that, if you buy one of the older models and you're looking to do this yourself, The part's only about $136 at the time of this video. However, in order to replace it, this entire cooling manifold has to come off, the charging rotor has to come off, and of course there's a slew of special tools that's needed to get all in here to replace that part and put everything back together. Another common failure on these bikes is the right-hand control module. In particular, the start and shutdown switch of the right-hand control module. So symptoms of one that's going bad is you would go to shut it off and it wouldn't shut off right away. The engine would continue to run for several seconds. And if you went to start the motorcycle, sometimes it would not start right away with pushing the button, on ultimately failing completely where it wouldn't start at all. 2023 came out with an updated version of the right-hand control module, and you can tell if that newer one's been retrofitted to an older bike. The original one, which is what I have, I still have the original, haven't had any problems with it, and it has the starter button flush with the shut-off switch, whereas the updated version, the starter button will be raised up above that start-off switch a little bit. If you do need to replace this and you don't have a warranty to cover it, it is going to run about $340 for the part, and it does need to be programmed by the dealer to work with your bike. Another common issue some folks have had is with the charging system of the motorcycle. Issues like magnets working their way loose on the rotor, stators going out. So when you're looking to buy a used Pan America, look and make sure that when it's running at idle, you should be well above 13 volts charging the battery. Now that's as you see the voltage on the TFT screen of the bike. In my experience, the voltage measured at the screen is about 0.2 volts less than what it is when I measure it directly at the battery with a voltmeter. 2024 did see an updated charging system come out for the bike. It doesn't put out any more current in total, but they updated it to put out more current at low RPM in order to keep up with folks that are running a lot of accessories on the bike. Now the bad news though is with that, they stopped making the original charging system parts that work in 21 through 23. So any charging system failures in those years, you have to replace everything to upgrade to the 24 system. That includes stator, rotor, as well as this entire coolant manifold, since it was machined to allow some more clearance for bigger parts. To buy all those individual parts is going to cost you about $1,100, and then plus the labor or special tools that you're going to need to do that work. For me, with my 21 original charging system, everything's still running strong. Now, I mentioned earlier about folks having an issue just going through batteries on this bike. Some folks have swapped to lithium batteries, and I'm kind of on the fence there. I did a video testing lithium ion compared to AGM with this bike, so check that out. I'll have a link to it if you're interested in seeing that. But in 24, Harley Davidson upgraded the size of the battery from the 225 CCA battery that originally came with the bike to a 315 CCA battery. Now, you can put that bigger battery in prior model years if you swap out to the larger battery tray, and you also have to buy some longer cables and other bits to make it all work. In the end, it's going to run you about 220 bucks for those parts, plus the cost of the battery. Now, for the most common failure on this bike, one that has affected me as well, is the fuel pump. My fuel pump started screeching at about 8,000 miles. I had the dealer replace it under warranty. I'm 10,000 miles since then and not have had any issues yet. But I do know of folks that have had higher mileage bikes that have gone through multiple fuel pumps. There's a lot of speculation as to what is causing these fuel pump failures. Some folks bring up ethanol and overall grade of the fuel. Some folks mention about letting the tank run too low and having the fuel pump overheat, while others think that it's the ethanol reacting with the aluminum tank. In fact, in 24, Harley Davidson coated the inside of the fuel tank. Whether it was specifically to address that issue is still speculation, because there have been reports of 2024 owners that have still killed their fuel pump. Now, I do want to clarify, when I say kill their fuel pump, I am not aware of anybody, I've not seen any reports of a fuel pump completely dying and leaving somebody stranded. Usually these things go just by making a ton of noise and then starting to drop fuel pressure. Most people then get it replaced before it becomes a complete failure. 2025 did introduce a new fuel pump assembly. The actual pump mechanism is the same, I believe, but the assembly is a little different, and it has a much larger pre-filter. So it's still too early to tell right now whether or not that is the fix that is going to help people not kill fuel pumps all the time. If you do need to replace a fuel pump out of warranty, that assembly costs about $360 right now. So those are the big issues that I know about. And hey, if you're able to buy one of these used and save $5, $6, maybe even $8,000 or more over buying new, yeah, maybe dropping a couple of bucks to fix a couple of these common things isn't that big a deal. You might think to yourself, hey, I'll add an extended warranty plan and still make out in the end. And you might. The only thing I want to caution on extended warranty plans is to really read the fine print as to coverage limits. But I do know the Harley Davidson extended service plan has coverage limits that will only cover a repair up to the current resale value of the motorcycle. So if you got one of those early models where the resale value continues to go downward and you bought that extended service plan, if you need to use it, you might be limited in what they're actually going to cover. For more details on Harley's extended service plan and what it covers, what it doesn't, you can check out the video I did on that in the description below. Of all these issues that I've mentioned here today, the only ones I have personally experienced are the starter clutch, which I had replaced under warranty, and one fuel pump that I had replaced under warranty. Everything else has been running fine. I've been out loving this bike, and if you're able to find one at a really good price, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it does well for you. Thanks for watching. What? Beastie? We're trying to film a video here. Yeah. We're trying to make a video.